Chapter 51, Meeting with Kingpin. Just as Pierce cancelled the follow-up mission for Hiden, Kingpin, who was also involved, was not idle either. At this moment, he was busy holding a gang meeting. Yes. Because of the previous incident, AIMS's security team had swept through New York once again. This led to the demise of many gangs. Their territory. It had also become an ownerless land. As for the other gangs, they had long since received the news and hid. Now, the AIMS's Guard Crusade had already ended. These gang forces were preparing to return to the underground world. And the vacant land has become a commodity for the riches. It attracted the covetous eyes of the various powers. They were eyeing a piece of that. And as the underground emperor of New York, at this time, Kingpin naturally had to stand up. Therefore, he gathered all the remaining leaders of the big gangs. He was ready to start a new distribution of powers tonight. Why did he choose tonight? Because Kingpin was certain. After tonight, Hiden Intelligence would definitely vanish into thin air. And without Hiden Intelligence, there will be nowhere for the police to buy that annoying Humajir from. Since that was the case, then it was better to divide the territory as soon as possible. After all, soon, those land would be redistributed again. His underground industries would be able to be restored. One must know. Every day this New York underground crime stopped, he would lose millions of dollars. No one would go against money. And at this moment, the conference room was already filled with the leaders of various gangs. There was a leader of the bandit gang who had braids and diamond teeth. There was a white man with a tattoo of an angel from hell and a gold chain around his neck. There was even one of them. There was also the old lady, Mrs. Gao, who was wearing a suit. These guys. They were the remaining leaders of the underworld forces. They sat there. They were not pleasing to the eye. Thinking about it, that was true. After all, everyone used to be sworn enemies. Now, they had gathered here for their mutual interests. How could they coexist peacefully? Everyone was shouting. The door to the meeting room suddenly opened. A giant figure walked in. Thud thud thud. Every step he took, the ground would tremble as well. It was no other. It was New York's underworld emperor, Kingpin. There were two people following behind him. After seeing Kingpin come in, the entire conference room instantly fell silent. Kingpin glanced at the people present. Then, he sat on the big chair in the main seat. I believe in everyone. I already know the purpose of gathering everyone today. In that case, then I won't waste any more time. Let's start the distribution now. Kingpin said. The attendant next to him opened a vast screen behind him. On the screen, it showed the map of New York. Kingpin picked up the cigar. Someone next to him immediately lit it for him. After taking a puff, Kingpin began to distribute it. Mrs. Gao. In New York, I will give you 50% of the drug business. However, you need to give me a 30% commission. How is it? Kingpin raised his head and looked at an old lady dressed in plain clothes. One could only see wrinkles on her face. She looked like an ordinary old lady, without any difference. However, everyone present knew that she was not a simple existence. Her name was Lady Gao. She was one of the founders of New York's underground organization. There was a large number of loyal subordinates under her command. Before New York was cleared, she had already controlled 30 of New York's drug businesses. It could be seen how outstanding her ability was. Therefore, this time, Kingpin had increased her share. No problem. Mrs. Gao's expression was extremely calm. She nodded. This meant that she had approved of Kingpin's distribution method. Then, the remaining 50% of the drug market, the Eros gang and the Aryan Brotherhood will split it equally. Kingpin nodded and said again. What? Right at this moment, the leader of the Black Bandit gang instantly quit. Who didn't know? Kingpin was the one who secretly controlled the Eros gang and the Aryan Brotherhood. Before, Kingpin had sent the Rhino. He moved into the Russian Black gang. But he didn't expect that. Most of them were wiped out. Now, there were still some remnants of the forces left. And the Aryan Brotherhood also had Kingpin's subordinates among them. This guy had given all the remaining drugs to them. Then let their gangster brothers drink the northwest wind. Just as the leader of the Black Bandit gang wanted to protest, A flying knife suddenly shot out from behind Kingpin. With a whoosh, it directly pierced through that guy's throat. For a moment, blood splattered everywhere. The bandit leader covered his neck. His head fell onto the conference table. He twitched twice. He stopped struggling. Fresh blood oozed out from his neck. Most of the conference table was dyed red. So, is there anyone else who objects? A person walked out from behind Kingpin. He wore a leather jacket and had a ferocious expression. He looked ruthless. The most peculiar thing was the top of his head. Not only was there not a single strand of hair, there was also a target tattooed on his forehead. This fellow was Kingpin's most loyal subordinate. Bullseye. Legend. Any object that could be thrown would become his weapon. From the start of his debut till now, it was unknown how many people had died under his hands. As the bullseye talks, he was also holding another flying knife, licking it with his tongue from time to time. It was as if as long as someone objected, that flying knife would immediately fly out. Everyone present immediately shook their heads. After all, no one was a fool. Very good. Now, let's proceed with the distribution of the next asset. Kingpin said indifferently as he puffed out a cigarette. And it was right above. While the loot distribution was in full swing. Below. It was Levi's time for revenge. The storm is coming. Chapter 52, Ruler of the New World. At this time, it was already late at night. The originally bustling street gradually became cold and silent. Even the surrounding street lights had already been extinguished. But the Fisk building. However, the lights were still brightly lit. Not only that. There were also more than a dozen burly men patrolling the periphery of the building. To prevent outsiders from intruding. Initially, they were all hired thugs by Kingpin in the various big gangs. However, due to the previous cleanup activities. Therefore, these guys were all withdrawn. However, he could not let them be idle. Therefore, he arranged for them to be the patrolling security guards around the building. They were responsible for sealing off this area. After all, tonight can also be considered a gathering in the underworld. We can't let some petty people barge in. It will spoil the mood of all the bosses. However, it was very obvious. Tonight, until now, everything was fine. Thinking about it, that was true. This Kingpin was the emperor of the underworld. Who dared to cause trouble in his territory? Even the police in New York City must have the courage to do so. They were just putting on a show. And it was already late at night. Therefore, everyone was somewhat slack. They sat together in twos and threes, smoking and chatting. I don't know either. How's the gathering going? Don't worry. According to my experience, this kind of gathering usually ends very quickly. It won't be long before we can return to New York again. We'll be able to live a good life. I've had enough of such a cowardly life. When we get out, let's go order a few. Just as everyone was talking freely, the sound of footsteps came from the distant street. Everyone was puzzled. They immediately raised their heads and looked in the direction of the sound. They saw the darkness in the distance. Two figures were walking towards them at an unhurried pace. When they got closer, only then did they see their appearances clearly. One of them had a head of blonde hair. He was dressed in a black and purple feathered garment. On his waist, there was a katana. The face is cold and solemn, as if from the ancient neon warriors. The other person was wearing a hood. His face was filled with a childlike smile. We've finally arrived. It shouldn't be too late. He said with a smile. Hurry up and start. Hirobi. I'm a little impatient. However, the yellow-haired man on the other side did not respond immediately. He raised his head, aimed at the Fisk building in front of him, and began to scan. Object analysis in progress. The Fisk building. Confirmed. The target is the same. Assassination mission, activate. Let's go, Jin. The yellow-haired man called Hirobi said coldly. That's right. These two people were the killers sent by Levi. Hirobi and Jin from Metsubojinrei.net's organization. After saying that, the two of them continued walking forward. It was as if they did not see the group of security guards in front of them. Hey! Don't go any further. Bastard! Don't you know where this is? A tall, muscular white man walked out of the group of security guards. He was the captain of the outer security guards. This guy looked at Hirobi and Jin with contempt. Obviously. He regarded Hirobi and Jin as two cosplayers. Get lost. While I'm in a good mood right now. This guy raised his hand. He was prepared to reward Hirobi and Jin with two big slap. Who knew? Only then did he wave his hand out. Jin, on the other side, was like a speedster. He grabbed it. Then, with a backhanded throw, he threw it to the ground. Then, he easily broke this guy's arm. The security captain immediately screamed like a pig being slaughtered. This guy is so weak. Jin, who had done all of this. He could not help but scratch his head and complain. When the remaining security guards saw this scene, their expressions changed greatly. This guy pretends to be a pig and eats a tiger. That being the case, then don't blame them for being impolite. Bang! 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 For a moment, dozens of bullets shot. They shot in the direction of Jin. As for the security captain on the ground, he couldn't help but reveal a cruel smile after seeing this scene. He couldn't help but reveal a cruel smile on his face. At this moment, he seemed to have seen the two of them lying in a pool of blood, their bodies riddled with holes. However, the next second, his smile froze on his face. Hirobi, who was at the side, suddenly moved. He suddenly pulled out the katana in his hand and lay it horizontally in front of them. The bullet that shot over instantly hit the middle of the katana. In an instant, it was split in half. Then, it shot towards the surroundings and exploded. The flames exploded. However, this was only the beginning. Hirobi continued to slash forward with his katana in hand. Silver light flashed. Brilliant light appeared. The speed at which it was waving was already so fast that it could not be seen with the naked eye. Only the sound of bullets and blades clashing could be heard. A moment later, everything stopped. On the ground, countless bullets were scattered all over. If the young man looked closely, they would find out. Those bullets had a very clean cut. It was as if it had been cut by a machine. Not only that, there were even some bullets. It was reflected by the blade. It just so happened that he killed several enemies on the other side. This scene. They were stunned by what they saw. Their eyes widened in disbelief. They could not believe what was happening. How is this possible? Katana that splits bullets. Is this a human's work? The remaining security guards stammered. Ha 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 ha. Hirobi's actions just now were so cool. Jin stood at the side, clapping like a child. And at this time, taking advantage of this gap, the security captain on the ground struggled to get up. He wanted to escape from here. However, behind him, Jin seemed to have seen a fun toy. He pulled him over. He locked his throat so that he could not move. Then, he pulled out a pistol from his waist. Aim at his temple. He suddenly pulled the trigger. Bang! The bullet pierced through his head. Blood splattered everywhere. It was like a flower blooming. On Jin's face, he was smiling like a child. It was as if what he had just done was not murder. It was like a game. This scene caused everyone present to shudder. Who are you people? They asked shakily. Us. Jin stopped laughing. He looked up at the sky. He seemed to be thinking about how to answer this question. If you insist us on saying it, we can be considered the rulers of a new era. All of a sudden, Jin seemed to have thought of an answer and immediately said. Right. Hirobi. He turned his head and looked at Hirobi. Chapter 53, by the order of the President. God of the New World. As for Jin's comment, it was a bit ridiculous. Hirobi was non-committal. No matter what he said, it was fine. Only to not expose. Their relationship with Hiden Intelligence was enough. After all, their president still cared a lot about the image of the company. For this, the two had intentionally covered up their humidgerier with their hats. Now then, are you ready to die? Hirobi looked ahead at the remaining guys. He coldly raised his blade. Run! The security guards saw this and immediately ran towards the Fisk building. Aha! How interesting! Jin seemed to have found a toy. He immediately took out another gun. Aim at those escaping fellows. He immediately launched a hunt. Although he and Hirobi were both assassins. However, they had their own preferences toward weapons. Hirobi preferred cold weapons, so he chose the katana as his weapon. And Jin preferred pistols. Bang! 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 Not long after, the two of them had already charged into the Fisk building's hall. On the first floor, the remaining gang members heard the commotion. They charged out one after another. However, facing Hirobi and Jin, they had no strength to resist at all. They saw Hirobi dodge the bullets that were coming at him. Then, he waved the katana in his hand. Even the guns in the hands of those guys were chopped into pieces. As for Jin, he wandered within. His guns were firing. It bloomed amid slaughter, just like a flower in the dawn. Very quickly, the scene was cleared out. Right, Hirobi. President, didn't you tell us to sneak in and carry out an assassination? At this time, Jin looked at the corpses around him. As if he suddenly remembered something, he asked with some doubt. According to the memory of his program, stealth should be a priority. But now, they were so open and obvious. Wasn't it a little inappropriate? Let's kill all the people inside. It is a stealth if there is no witness. Hirobi said matter-of-factly. So that's how it is. Jin seemed to have come to a sudden realization as he hurriedly nodded. Just as Hirobi and Jin were about to start a massacre, Kingpin, who was on the top floor, he had already completed the distribution of assets. The leaders of the gangs present no longer had any objections. Kingpin looked at the reactions of the people present with satisfaction. After tonight, he would regain control of New York's underground forces. Even his control was far greater than before. Perhaps he should thank that Hiden Intelligence fellow. Thinking of this, a sinister smile couldn't help but appear on his face. Compared to that guy, he had already been taken back by Hydra to do secret research. However, at this moment, the door of the conference room opened. His black butler hurriedly walked in. Then, he whispered a few words into Kingpin's ear. What? Kingpin's expression changed slightly. Turn on the surveillance camera. I want to see. Who dares to intrude into my territory? Kingpin said sternly. Yes. The black butler immediately ordered his subordinates. He displayed the surveillance video. In the hall, the scene of Hirobi and Jin killing in all directions was immediately revealed. When the bosses of the gang saw this scene, they were stunned. They couldn't help but look at each other in dismay. He actually chose this time. Very good. He successfully angered me. Kingpin looked at the reactions of the people present and snorted coldly. He was a little doubtful now. Were these two killers sent by the people present? Lady Gao. Is this fellow your subordinate? He asked coldly. Everyone knew. A group of ninja killers called the Hand Order led by Lady Gao. And in the surveillance, one of them was holding a katana. It was hard not to associate this with something. How can I be your enemy? Lady Gao, sitting on the seat, quickly raised her hand to express her opinion. I hope what you said is true. How about? Kingpin snorted coldly. Then, he turned around and said to the black butler. Seal off the entire floor. Let them see how powerful we are. This Fisk building. As Kingpin's lair, it was naturally not that simple. Every level. They all had mechanisms. Once activated, it would cause great damage to the enemy. Yes. The black butler immediately informed the Fisk building of the control room. At this time, Hirobi and Jin. They were stepping on the enemy's corpse. Prepare to head to the next level. Then, at this moment, at the various exits of the first level, a colossal steel plate had shockingly fallen down. Immediately after, several pillars were also removed from their disguises. They turned into machine guns. I want to see how you all escape and ascend to heaven. Kingpin sat on the chair and snorted. However, facing this unsolvable situation, Hirobi suddenly raised his head. He looked at the monitor. His originally cold face suddenly revealed a hint of a smile. It was as if he had already seen through the crowd of people watching him from the monitor. How stupid! You want to use this to trap us? He suddenly raised his hand. With a whoosh, a purple electronic tube immediately shot out from his wrist. It directly inserted into the screen of the monitor. For a moment, fire splashed in all directions. System connected. Seizing control. Chapter 54, Dr. Octopus the security admin. At this time, in the vast central control room of the Fisk building. When the staff was busy, behind them, a green figure stood proudly. What was surprising was, this guy's body was actually suspended in mid-air. Behind him, 4 machine arms were constantly moving. Seal these 2 intruders to the first level. Don't leave any gaps for them. Let them see how powerful our security system is. He said in a hoarse voice. Yes, Dr. Octopus. The staff below hurriedly replied. That's right. This guy was one of the nemesis of Spider-Man in the future. Octopus Dr. Otto. He was initially a promising scientist. He worked for Osborn Industries. However, because of an accidental experimental accident, it had caused a great loss. Thus, he was kicked out by Osborn. As for Kingpin, he had taken a fancy to his talent. Thus, he hired him. Let him be the Fisk building's technical supervisor. At the same time, fund his research. However, right here at Dr. Octopus' office, after giving the order, on the main screen of the surveillance room, a red exclamation mark suddenly appeared. Immediately after, this phenomenon spread to the other screens. What's going on? Seeing this situation, Octopus Doctor could not help but turn pale with fright. He quickly controlled his mechanical arm. He came in front of the control. Get out of the way. He pushed the operator away. He typed in all kinds of instructions on the keyboard. However, this operation did not have any effect. This might be the work of a hacker. Their security system had been completely invaded. It had gone entirely out of control. Damn it, how is this possible? Octopus Doctor had an expression of disbelief. One had to know. He personally developed this security system. It contained many high-difficulty codes. How was this possible? The enemy so easily broke it. It is malfunctioning. There shouldn't be a problem with malfunction. Just as Dr. Octopus was in a fury. Just as he was about to attempt to repair everything. However, the screen suddenly changed. Hirobi's figure suddenly appeared above them. He raised his head and looked disdainfully at the people in front of the screen. Everyone. Metsubujinray.net. He has taken over your control department. Next. Prepare for the judgment of death. He said coldly. Damn it. What did this guy do? Octopus Doctor was so anxious that he was sweating. However, there was no way to deal with it. And in the conference room on the top floor, the gang leaders couldn't help but panic. Kingpin also saw the scene just now through the display screen. His face was ashen. It was extremely ugly. The enemy had actually invaded the security system of his mansion in front of him. This Dr. Octopus. What exactly was he doing? One must know. This Kingpin knew that what he was doing was not a legitimate business. Therefore, he paid extra attention to his own safety. Chapter 55, Storming the Fisk Building. As for this Fisk Building, as his lair, he was naturally focused on managing it. He armed it like a fortress. Many places. They all had weapons and mechanisms. And the secret passageway. Even if all the police in New York City moved out in full force, they would still have many casualties. They might not even be able to penetrate this fortress. From this, it could be predicted how many mechanical weapons were installed in this building. But now, this seemingly impregnable fortress had been breached from the inside. This made Kingpin extremely furious. But very quickly, he calmed down. Because he could not solve the problem with anger. Now, things had not developed to a point where they could not be saved. He still had hope of turning the tables. As long as they could get rid of the 2 invaders. All the questions. They all could be solved by violence. The top floor. It was Kingpin's residence. So it was the only place without any traps. Even if the security system of the building was controlled, it is unable to control this place. If they wanted to assassinate him, they had to reach the top floor. Here. Other than him, hundreds of subordinates could be used as meat shield. Moreover, there were also these gang leaders among them. Now, Kingpin thinks he still has the advantage. Don't panic. Kingpin said in a deep voice. As expected of New York's underworld emperor. His 3 words and 2 words caused everyone present to be quiet down for the time being. Prepare to be united and resist the enemy. And below. Hirobi withdrew his electronic pipe. At this moment, he had gained control of the Fisk building. Naturally, he also knew where Kingpin was. He suddenly raised his hand. Ka ka ka. He saw the steel plates that had fallen just now rise together. The machine gun was also retracted. Let's go. The two of them walked towards the elevator. There was a click. The elevator closed. Then, it rushed to the top floor. Ci la la. Sparks flew from the friction of the elevator, and it rolled upwards. And every time, they reached the next level, Hirobi would deactivate the firepower system on that level. Day. Flamethrower. Laser beam. Those gangsters who they hit are screaming to heaven and earth. They all died tragically. Soon. The elevator arrived at the top floor. Ding. The elevator door opened. The two of them stepped inside. He only saw his surroundings. Countless gang members already surrounded him. Among them, other than Kingpin's subordinate, the other gang leaders were not idle either. They sent out their subordinates one after another. Prepare to fight. For example, Madame Gao of the Hand. To clear her suspicion, the dozens of ninjas under her were already here to fight. As for Kingpin, he was standing behind everyone. However, his tall body still could be seen. He had a cigar in his mouth. He looked coldly at Hirobi and Jin, who had just walked out of the elevator. His eyes were full of flames of anger. All of you, get them. Upon hearing Kingpin's command, hundreds of gangsters surrounded them. They shouted together. The momentum was heaven-shaking. Then, they rushed toward Hirobi and Jin at the elevator entrance. Looks like there are a lot of people welcoming us. Jin faced the encirclement of the crowd without any fear. He was still smiling as he spoke. As for Hirobi, who was at the side, he did not waste any more words. Assassinate the target. It was right in front of him. It was more important to complete the mission. Thinking of this, he no longer hesitated. He raised his hand and raised the purple feathers on his body. Then, he took out something from his chest. He took out something and placed it on his waist. A silver-grey belt. It immediately shot out from both ends of the object and then fixed itself on Hirobi's waist. This is... Seeing this scene, Kingpin's heart suddenly sank. Why was this thing similar to what he had seen in his memory card back then? Could it be Hiden Intelligence sent the two fellows in front of him? Impossible. Could this Hiden Intelligence's power be greater than Hydra's? Although that was the case. However, his hand that held the cigar was trembling. Or was it to clarify his true thoughts? And at this moment, Hirobi, who was facing him, did not care too much. Then, he took out a purple Projirisekis. Chapter 56, Kamen Rider Hirobi. This was a tool that Satellite Arc had specially created for him. Poison. Henshin. Hirobi smiled coldly. Then, he raised his hand and inserted Projirisekis into the slot of Metsubujin Ray Force Riser. Along with the Metsubujin Ray Force Riser, there was a unique sense of danger, the sound effect. Projiriseki's power instantly erupted. Wang! A purple light spread out. It was a mechanical electronic scorpion. It jumped out from Projirisekis. It landed in front of Hirobi. This scene. The gangsters who were charging forward immediately stopped in their tracks. They looked at the colossal scorpion in front of them in horror. They were terrified. Humph! Hirobi snorted coldly. Then, he pulled the lever of the forced sublimator. Force Riser. The panel of the Spike Scorpion program sublimation key was forcefully pulled open. At this moment, the electronic scorpion also turned around. Immediately, it stabbed his sting into Hirobi's body. This scene. Everyone present couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. However, all of this was not over yet. The mechanical scorpion. It used its tail as the base point. It instantly flipped over and arrived behind Hirobi. Its pincers and 6 legs tightly wrapped around his body. Then, it directly shattered, turning into a purple-black armor that appeared on his body. Breakdown. Along with the mechanical voice of the forced sublimation device, the purple-black Kamen Rider Hirobi appeared. He's really too cool. Jin, who was at the side, clapped and praised. Then now, the massacre begins. The purple-black knight glanced at everyone present. Then he rushed forward. Hurry up! Kingpin shouted. Many gangsters. Although there was fear in his heart, he had no choice but to bite the bullet. He charged forward. As for the gang members who were rushing over like a tide, that purple-black knight, there was no fear. As he raised his hand, he waved it. Boom! Those gangsters! It was simply unable to resist the force of its strike. They have instantly blasted apart. Some even directly exploded into a bloody mist. From this, it could be seen. This Hirobi's current strength was terrifying. And just as Hirobi continued to advance forward, just as he was about to head toward where Kingpin was, the bullseye in the outer area had found an opportunity. He had been waiting at the side for a long time. He suddenly leaped up. Several ball-shaped objects suddenly shot out from his hands. Leave it to me. This bullseye had thrown it at this moment. It was not a small thing. This was the spherical bomb he had specially bought from Osborne's industry. Its power was unparalleled. However, when faced with the bomb thrown by Bullseye, the purple-black knight had no intention of dodging. He allowed the ball-shaped bombs to land around him. There was a boom. Flames surged. Some of the gangsters around Hirobi were affected. They were instantly blasted into a pile of minced meat. The scene was also filled with smoke. I succeeded. Bullseye raised his hand in celebration and said proudly. However, the next second, he froze on the spot. The thick smoke quickly dissipated. The purple-black knight was covered in a layer of purple scorpion shadows. He was completely unharmed. Not only that. In his hand, there was a mechanical briefcase. As the smoke dispersed, Hirobi slowly raised his head and looked at Bullseye in the distance. Then, it's my turn now. As he spoke, he held the briefcase in his hand and shook it. The briefcase in his hand instantly transformed into a purple-black mechanical crossbow. Hirobi raised his hand. Taking advantage of the situation, he pulled. Boom! A purple energy beam was seen. It instantly condensed. Shoo! The next second, the purple energy beam turned into a sharp arrow. It tore through the sky. It instantly shot towards Bullseye's forehead. No! When Bullseye saw this, he ran into the crowd in a panic. But that purple energy arrow! It was as if it had eyes. It instantly followed. It tore through the sky. It chased into the target mark on Bullseye's forehead. Boom! His head instantly exploded. Blood splattered everywhere. His body was still stiff there. Then the next one will be you. As he spoke, Hirobi raised the bow in his hand again. He aimed at Kingpin. Damn it! At this moment, Kingpin did not dare to make a big fuss again. He hurriedly ran behind his subordinate. Chapter 57, Kamen Rider Jin. There were several secret passages there. They could allow him to escape. However, before he could escape, the purple arrow suddenly flew out and was about to hit Kingpin. However, it was at this moment. Boom! A hole suddenly appeared on the ground below. A figure shot out from below. The purple energy arrow was sent flying and exploded to the side. Oh! Hirobi stared closely. The person who had arrived was Dr. Octopus, who had been controlling the surveillance room earlier. Hurry up and leave. This Dr. Octopus turned his head and looked at Kingpin who had fallen to the ground behind him. His voice was hoarse as he spoke. One had to know. This Kingpin was currently his only patron. If he died, his research plan would be completely ruined. Kingpin hurriedly got up from the ground. He ran forward without looking back. As for Dr. Octopus, he stood in front of Hirobi. He blocked his path. Aya, Aya. We can't let this guy run away. Jin, who was originally at the side, seemed to have realized it later. He tilted his head and said. If you don't complete the mission, President is going to be angry. As he spoke, he took out Metsubujin Ray Force Riser, which has the same style as Hirobi. Then, he placed it on his waist. A silver grey belt. It instantly shot out from both sides. It wrapped around his waist. An electric current flashed. A red light appeared in Jin's eyes as well. His eyes no longer looked as childish as before. Damn it! Does this guy have one too? Kingpin, who was running away, turned around and saw the scene. He couldn't help but stagger. Kamen Rider Hirobi was already so terrifying. Now there was another one. Today? Would he die here? No, he must not die. He was Kingpin, the king of the underworld. How could he die here? He swept his gaze across the crowd. He discovered that his subordinates had suffered heavy casualties. Bullseye had been shot in the head, and Dr. Octopus was about to block Hirobi. He couldn't free himself at all. Now it seemed the only one who could help him resist for a while. It is only one person. As he thought about this, his gaze fell on a person in the corner. Just as Kingpin was thinking, a rose-red Projirisekis. It was already in Jin's hands. Wing. Jin pressed the button. Then, he inserted it into Metsubujin Rayforcerizer's slot. The hazardous sound effect immediately rang out. Henshin. With a smile on his face, Jin immediately pulled the handle of the transformation device. Ci la la. A pink electric light instantly overflowed. Jin raised his hands and felt the surge of electricity. The corners of his mouth curled into a smile. This was the first time he had ever transformed. He must be a little excited. And with the pull of the handle, the energy of Projiriseki's Flying Falcon was instantly drawn out. Force Riser. Flying Falcon. Ci la la. Along with a burst of red lightning, an electronic eagle with a mechanical sense instantly tore out from it. It soared in the middle of the building. Then, it returned to Jin. Then, it closed its body and wings. It covered Jin's entire body. Ci la la. Pink lightning circled around him. HBW down, damaged. Along with the sound of the electric pulse, the body of the mechanical eagle suddenly shattered. Then, it transformed into a set of red and silver armor and appeared on Jin's body. Kamen Rider Jin made a brilliant appearance. This is too exciting. Jin looked at his armor. He was extremely excited. He was like a child who had obtained a toy. He had temporarily forgotten to attack. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Kingpin looked at the figure from before. Madam Gao, help me block that guy. After this is done, I promise that the drug business in New York City will belong to you. I will not take any commission. Kingpin shouted. Madam Gao, who had been standing guard at the side, couldn't help but frown when she heard this. In fact, she had no the strength to spare. When her subordinates had faced Hirobi just now, they hadn't gone all out either. She was completely curled up in a corner. Because she had already seen through it. These two killers. They were completely targeting Kingpin. It had nothing to do with her. But now, it was different. This Kingpin had actually promised to give him the entire drug market under New York. This would be a huge benefit. If they swallowed it, they would gain huge benefits. Of course. Some people would ask. What if they wanted to seize New York's drug market before Kingpin died? One must know. This underground force did not rely solely on force. The reason why Kingpin could unify New York's underworld. It was not only because of his subordinates. Chapter 58, Madame Gao and Otto Strikes Back. He was raised to the top because he had great connections. Even the government had many of his spies. He represented the order of the underworld. Once he died, the order of the underworld would instantly collapse. At that time, if he wanted to seize the entire drug market, he would have to pay an unimaginable price. Good. Since that's the case, then I won't be polite. Madame Gao thought for a moment and nodded in agreement. She waved her hand. The black-clothed ninjas under her command immediately moved. Shua, Shua, Shua. They rushed towards Kamen Rider Jin. While they were moving forward, they were still in the middle of the journey. These guys took out the kunao dart from their pockets. They shot at Jin one after another. Su su su. Su. Thinking deeply. In the face of those darts and kunao, Jin immediately applauded. He was as excited as a child. Come on. Let me play. He saw Jin shake his arms. A pair of metal blade-like wings instantly appeared behind his back. That pair of metal blade wings. He immediately drew them over. He blocked the attacks in front of him. Clang. 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 He blocked all the darts one by one. After they finished shooting, Jin once again spread out his steel wings. If you guys are done, then, it's my turn now. Jin shouted, and then he flew into the air. It swooped forward. It was like a humanoid falcon. Moreover, it was swift. Phew! I'm here. They saw that Jin had arrived in front of the ninjas instantly. These ninjas immediately took out their katana from their waists. They used it to block Jin's attack. However, the pink figure flashed away. It didn't seem to make a gesture to attack him at all. These ninjas heaved a sigh of relief. However, Madame Gao's eyelids twitched. Not good. Sure enough. In the next second, they saw the katana in the ninja's hands. It was instantly cut in two. And then, shiu, shiu. Terrifying scratch marks appeared. Their bodies were split into two pieces. They fell to the ground. Blood splattered. This was the terrifying aspect of Kamen Rider Jin. Jin was incomparably fast. He kills swiftly. How fragile. Jin hovered in the air, watching the scene below. He couldn't help but laugh again. After that, he turned his gaze to Kingpin in the distance. Next, it's your turn. Jin said with a smile. When Kingpin heard this voice, he was scared to death. Cold sweat flowed down his back. He didn't dare to stop at all. He rolled and crawled as he rushed forward. Madame Gao! Save me! And at this moment, Jin had already started. He was like a hunting eagle. He swooped down towards his prey. However, at this moment, suddenly, a lightning-like sound rang out from below. Immediately after, a whip cut through the sky. It suddenly waved towards Jin. Jin suddenly felt a tremendous force coming from behind him. It dragged him forward. What's going on? He immediately lowered his head. He saw that a whip had locked his feet. And the other end of the whip was in the hands of Madame Gao. And in the next second, that power came again. With a swoosh, the whip instantly fetched up Jin in the air, after a few circles. Then, he was heavily smashed onto the ground. Boom! Smoke and dust rose everywhere. And just as Jin's feet were bound, when he fell to the ground, the battle on the other side had already begun. Dr. Octopus was the first to launch an attack. Hiss! The mechanical arm behind him had a dazzling claw tip. It suddenly attacked Hirobi in front of it. The tip of the claw continued to spin. It stirred the air into a whirlwind. From this, it could be seen how terrifying this mechanical claw was. If caught by it, it was very likely that it would cause irreversible damage. Facing this sudden attack, Hirobi's body suddenly tilted. Hirobi quickly dodged it. However, right at this moment, another mechanical arm shot towards him from a strange angle. I already expected that you would dodge to this side, Dr. Octopus said with a laugh. One had to know. He was not some big and rough guy. He was born as a doctor at the Imperial University of Science and Technology. Chapter 59, Dr. Octopus Defeat. Before he did anything, he would go through some calculations. Long before he had made his move, he had already predicted the possible trajectory of his opponent's movements. He was waiting for him to follow the trap he had set. Step by step, he jumped into it. Die! You bastard! Dr. Octopus roared. However, the next second, Hirobi dodged once again. He barely managed to avoid it. The mechanical arm brushed past Hirobi's armor. It smashed into the stone pillar in front of it. The mechanical claw spinning at high speed was about to shatter the stone pillar. For a moment, smoke and dust flew everywhere. How is this possible? Dr. Octopus was shocked. His fatal attack had actually been dodged. Impossible! He roared furiously. The four mechanical arms behind him. Fire at full power. They surrounded Hirobi from all directions. But at this moment, Hirobi, his body swayed again. Every time, he would brush past the mechanical arm and dodge. Bang! 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 The ground was riddled with holes. As for Hirobi, even though he was struggling, he was still completely unharmed. How did you do it? Dr. Octopus asked unwillingly. Everything you did was within my calculations. Hirobi raised his hand and pointed at his head. He said indifferently. Yes. As the strongest person created by Arc, Humajir, he could calculate better than Uayaiba and Fuwasamu. When Dr. Octopus swung his mechanical arm, the AI chip in his body, it had already provided a solution. Your mechanical arm. It's still too weak. Yes. Compared to Hiden's company Kamen Rider System, that technology is nothing but child's play. This Dr. Octopus mechanical arm was far left behind in technology. Then now. It's time to end it. Hirobi said indifferently. As he spoke, he raised the crossbow in his hand and shook it once more. Arrow rise. Crack. The crossbow changed again. Above the bow arm, the slit blade pops out. It changed form. It looks like Kamen Rider Saber's sword. In fact, he wanted to make this saber. He saw Hirobi take out another piece of Projiriseki's. He immediately stuffed it into the weapon slot. Boom! On the blade of that crossbow, a raging fire immediately lit up. When Dr. Octopus' mechanical arm attacked again, Hirobi said nothing. He raised the blazing blade in his hand. Then, he slashed at the mechanical arm. Shingug! Sparks flew in all directions. It was like cutting tofu. The extremely hard mechanical octopus tentacle was immediately cut off. At the broken part, there were also traces of metal melting. Ah! On the other side, Dr. Octopus immediately cried out in pain. This mechanical arm broke. It got its own nerves connected to him. Cutting off a mechanical arm. It was the same as cutting off one of his arms. However, this was not the end. Hirobi suddenly dashed forward. The raging flame saber in his hand spins. Hoo! A circular flame slash was instantly formed. Dr. Octopus. The two mechanical arms that supported his body were also instantly destroyed. It was broken into two. Losing the support of these two mechanical arms, Dr. Octopus immediately fell down from the office. At this moment, he was sweating in pain. He also understood. I am afraid that I am not a match for this guy. Thinking of this, Dr. Octopus did not dare to fight again. He immediately waved his last mechanical arm. Clear the ground. He wanted to escape this place. After all, compared to his research dream, it was obvious. His own life was more important. Boom! The ground was opened. Below was a huge hole. This was the passage that Dr. Octopus had opened up earlier. And it was right in front of Dr. Octopus. Just a bit down. The remaining mechanical arm was still hanging on it. Hirobi suddenly raised the blazing blade in his hand. He waved it out. Hoo! The blazing blade immediately slashed forward. Flame wheel. One cut open Dr. Octopus' last mechanical arm. Arg! Chapter 60, Kingpin Last Stand. Dr. Octopus lost his support. He instantly fell down. The flaming saber followed closely behind him. It pierced through his chest. It nailed him to the wall below. Boom! The flames burned. Dr. Octopus was shrouded in flames. He let out a miserable scream. And at this time, Kingpin finally arrived at his secret passage. It was a suspended elevator that directly connected to the ground. Moreover, it was not under the control of the security system. Press the secret mechanism. The wall split open, and the elevator instantly activated. Kingpin hurriedly entered. He held the elevator wall and laughed loudly. As long as the elevator door is closed, he would be able to escape. Right now, those two fellows were 50 meters away from him. There was no way they could make it. As long as he could escape from this building. At that time, he would be able to gather his subordinates. He would become the underworld emperor of New York again. However, how could Hirobi allow his target to slip away from under his nose? He suddenly reached his waist. He grabbed Metsubujin Reinforcerezer's lever. First, he pushed. Then, he pulled it away again. Sting dystopia. Hirobi raised his hand. The thorn in his left hand immediately extended out. Crash! The long chain that was like a scorpion's tail suddenly shot out. It was like a nebula chain. In the elevator. A split second before the door closes. He instantly entered. Then, it wrapped around Kingpin's neck. He dragged him back. Boom! The elevator door was shattered. It pierced through the chains, dragging Kingpin along as it charged forward. In the end, it stopped 10 meters in front of Hirobi. The chains were retracted. Kingpin lay on the ground, panting heavily. Obviously, he had been strangled quite hard just now. Cough! Cough! Kingpin rubbed his neck. He fell to the ground and looked at Hirobi. His eyes were cloudy and uncertain. Although his strength was also very strong, his body was full of muscles. He was also proficient in various countries' fighting techniques. Even if it were 1 against 10, it would not be a problem. But that was only when compared to ordinary people. Facing this fellow in front of him, he had no chance of winning at all. Tell me. How can you let me go? Kingpin slowly got up from the ground and asked with a gloomy face. Money. Power. Woman. Anything you want, I can give it to you. He opened his hands and tried to tempt him. However, in the face of Kingpin's promise, Hirobi did not reply. He only raised his eyes and looked forward coldly. These things. To Humajir, it was not worth mentioning at all. Then it seems that there is nothing to talk about. Kingpin looked around. At this moment, he found that he had no support. Dr. Octopus' 4 limbs had already been cut off. It was unknown whether he was still alive or dead. Meanwhile, on the other side, Madame Gao. She tightly used her whip to lock the Red Knight. He was unable to use any skills. They were powerless to come and rescue him. Kingpin muttered to himself for a moment. He could not help but close his eyes. In that case, then he could only use that move. Thinking of this, his eyes couldn't help but reveal a trace of cruelty. He didn't hesitate much. He took out a potion from his pocket and threw it into his mouth. Swallow it in one gulp. One must know. As the Emperor of New York's underground forces, Kingpin had a huge amount of wealth and terrifying connections. Whether it was Hydra who was hiding underground, he had a way to contact the high-level leaders of the White House. This grew his endless ambition. He was no longer satisfied with just being an underground emperor. What he wanted to do was to be the leader on the ground. In order to realize his ambitions, he had secretly sponsored a lot of research. And among Marvel Universe, what they lacked the least were those crazy scientists. As long as they had financial support, they would dare to do any immoral experiments. And it was just recently. It was an underground biochemical team that he had sponsored. They had obtained a result. They had successfully developed an existence known as the Berserk Potion. After drinking this potion, it could allow a person to improve their abilities in a short period. It was even possible to cause a genetic mutation. Of course, the side effects were also very obvious. After using it once, there would be several months of weakness. Even worse, it could even directly cause death. Speaking of which, this is a bit like the kind of evil medicine mastered by Hope, the boss of Fishman Island in One Piece. Originally, for this kind of side effect, Kingpin didn't care much about it. Chapter 61, I Still Want to Play. Before the A.I.M.S purge, Kingpin tried to test his new medicine on his subordinate. However, just as he was about to hand this medicine over to his subordinates, just as he was going to test the effects, unexpectedly, A.I.M.S purge began. His subordinates all retreated to their old nest. There was no chance to use it. And so, this medicine had always been with him. He hadn't expected it to happen now. He becomes the first to test the medicine. Speaking of which, it was really ironic. And along with the use of the medicine, Kingpin's body immediately underwent a drastic change. Jang Jang. He saw his initially large body. It expanded once more. You should know. This Kingpin was very muscular. The body-fat ratio of his entire body was less than 2%. One punch could even compete against Spider-Man. And now, his muscles had strengthened once again. In less than a moment, his body became a circle thicker. The tight muscles directly burst the suit on his body. And the most obvious change was his right arm. Its whole body was like a war hammer. It looked like it was attached with a layer of steel armor. It was filled with power. It was just like the little boss of the Tokyo Ghouls, the Gecko. You forced me to do this. Kingpin raised his head again. His eyes had completely turned red. It looked like a black night. It was full of anger. He raised his right fist and punched the ground. Bang! A terrifying crack. It spread out in an instant. Some of the remaining gangsters could not help but tremble. From this, it could be seen. At this moment, Kingpin's strength had reached an astonishing level. Come! Fall into the abyss with me! Kingpin roared. Then, he rushed toward Hirobi, wanting to kill him in one fell swoop, but Hirobi didn't say anything. The piercing unit stretched out again like a viper. Then, it wrapped around his right foot. Ha! Not long after, Kingpin had already rushed in front of him. A huge black shadow covered him. It gave off a hefty sense of oppression. Go to hell! He raised his huge right fist and aimed it at the petite Hirobi below. He suddenly smashed down. As for Hirobi, he suddenly raised his right foot. He kicked towards the sky. The chains wrapped around his right foot. Blue and purple flames burned. Boom! The two suddenly collided together. Boundless power instantly spread out. The sharp silkworm spikes instantly pierced through Kingpin's muscles. Moreover, the deadly poison was continuously injected into his body. It seemed as if the words Yellow Purgatory Hirobi had appeared in the air. The next moment, the purple-black knight withdrew his right leg and turned to leave without hesitation. Woo! Ah! Kingpin froze on the spot. Countless scarlet electric arcs burst out from the surface of his body. A purple light shone from his body. It shone bit by bit until the light reached its peak. His entire body exploded with a loud bang. Rumble! Instantly, minced meat flew everywhere. Smoke and dust rose everywhere. The potent poison was mixed with the minced meat and blood. It flowed everywhere. Some of the remaining gang members accidentally touched it. They immediately turned into a pool of pus. The scene was extremely tragic. It was like a psychedelic hell. The villain of a generation, Kingpin, had fallen just like that. On the other side, seeing that Hirobi had already dealt with Kingpin, Lady Gao sighed. In the end, she was still unable to save him. Since that was the case, then forget it. She was about to turn around and run away. However, at this moment, there was a boom sound. On the ground, Jin got up again. He shook his head. He shook off the debris on his body. Then he broke free of the whip. He raised his head and looked around. What? It's already over. I still want to play for a while. With that, he turned to look at Lady Gao. I think I'll have to end this quickly. Otherwise, Hirobi will be angry. Jin rambled on. It turned out. The matter just now. For him, it was just a game. Lady Gao, who was facing Jin, could not help but take a few steps back when she saw Jin's appearance. She still wanted to say something. But in the next second, a dark red figure suddenly flashed in front of him. There was a piercing sound. Her neck was directly cut open. Blood fell like rain. The entire action was clean and neat. There was not the slightest bit of sloppiness. Chapter 62, Earth-shaking changes of the Underworld Syndicate. Jin. Leave the rest to Hirobi. The president does not want anyone to reveal the truth about what happened tonight. And at this time, suddenly Hirobi had appeared next to him. Understood. Jin turned around. He flew into the air. At this moment, there were still some gangsters at the scene who were hiding. They wanted to get away with it. I see you. Jin laughed softly. Then, he suddenly pulled the driver on his waist. Flying Utopia. Accompanied by the sound, a layer of crimson light appeared on the steel wings on his back. Immediately after, Jin's wings shook. He kicked down with his right foot. Boom! 4 large words seemed to appear behind his back. Kamen Rider Falcon Jin. In just an instant, countless crimson red light arrows shot down from the sky. It was like cherry blossom falling. It pierced through the many gangsters below. Their heart felt cold, and their heart was flying. They were dead. Not long after, Hirobi and Jin completed their mission. In the distance, an ear-piercing alarm rang out. Thinking about it, that was true. The commotion they caused just now was too big. Although it was late at night. But this Fisk building. After all, it was located in the center of the city. How could such a commotion not attract attention? It was expected to attract the police. The mission is over. Retreat. Hirobi stood on top of the Fisk building and looked down at the incoming police convoy. He then said indifferently. You're leaving so early. What a shame. Jin turned to look behind him, feeling reluctant to part with him. This was his first mission. He had not played enough yet. However, he did not dare to disobey Hirobi. He could only nod. Let's split up. Don't let others see us. Hirobi said again. Understood. Jin nodded, then spread his wings and flew into the sky. Not long after, He disappeared into the air. As for Hirobi, he removed his equipment. He stood at the top of the building. He directly jumped down from the highest point. Hoo! The strong wind howled. It lifted his purple-black feathers. The golden hair was also dancing in the process of falling. This stimulating feeling made Hirobi feel a burst of pleasure. Among them, a scarlet light flashed. It was as if something had awakened. Boom! It landed heavily on the ground. It smashed a hole in the ground. Hirobi stood up expressionlessly. Right. I seem to have forgotten something. He turned his head around and snapped his fingers. It was the security system inside the Fisk building. It immediately started operating. Detected full-scale invasion. Unable to resist, self-destruct sequence activated. Explosion begins. Just as the police convoy arrived downstairs. The Fisk building. It was detonated. Starting from the top. Layer by layer, they exploded. Flames soared into the sky. As for Hirobi, he stepped on the flames that filled the sky and walked into the distance. Like a lonely warrior. And below. The door of the police car opened. Chief George got out of the car. He pressed down on his police hat and looked at the blazing Fisk building. A trace of horror flashed through his eyes. He pressed down on his hat. He had just attended the banquet. He had only slept for a few hours. He receives a call on his phone. Looks like this New York's underground syndicates are about to change. Although it was not clear what exactly happened in this. However, the underground order of New York City was bound to undergo tremendous changes. There would be earth-shaking changes. It seemed. In the recent period. He was busy. Fortunately, there was the newly introduced police-type Humajir. The entire police force could also reduce casualties. And amid the chaos, Hirobi and Jin killed Kingpin. And when all of his subordinates were under Hirobi's control. On the other side, Akazuchi and Naki. They had also completed their own mission outstandingly. The headquarters of the Blackwater mercenaries. A massive fire also enveloped it. Hundreds of high-level mercenaries were slaughtered. Hydra transformation program. Artificial chip implant. The scene was too horrible to look at. Chapter 63, Drawing the New Kamen Rider Legacy. At Hiden Intelligence. In the 6th underground floor. 4 massive virtual screens hovered in the air. It was broadcasting what had just happened in real time. It was like a live broadcast. Levi, on the other hand, was holding a cup of coffee. He sat on the president's sofa, leisurely admiring everything. Izu stood behind him. Her slender fingers gently caress his shoulders. Very good. He saw the performance of the 4 people on the screen. The corners of his mouth could not help but curl into a smile. Next. He would let Metsubujinrai.net build an undercover force. It will be used to carry out assassinations and other dark activities. On one hand, he could use this to eliminate some people he didn't want to see. After all, he was the CEO of Hiden. He couldn't personally do this kind of thing. Therefore, he needed Metsubujinrai.net for this power. On the other hand, their existence. It could also make New York City more chaotic. And chaos would bring benefits. The security of Humajir sales produced by his own company. The sales volume with the police-type Humajir would definitely increase significantly. This move. It was based on what President Zaia had done in this guy. To sell his own Humajir. He set up a target for Metsubujinrai.net. With an enemy. Only the government would purchase their company's products. 2 birds with 1 stone. Why not? Thinking of this, Levi couldn't help but smile faintly. Now, the 3 organizations involved in this assassination operation. 2 of them had already been eliminated by Hirobi. And the most important one among them was Hydra. But he didn't send any men to carry out the extermination. In fact, although this Hydra had hidden very deeply. But, with Azu's strength, he could still find some clues in the underground network. From there, he could dig out the whereabouts of several of their secret bases. However, that was all. You have to know. This Hydra was said to be able to grow another 9 if you cut off one of its heads. Physical extinction does not have much effect on them. Even at this moment. If he sent Metsubujinrai.net and destroyed several secret bases of Hydra, that won't even change a thing. So, As for Hydra, this organization, he had a bigger plan. Just as Levi was deep in thought, the system voice he had not heard for a long time sounded again. Ding! Congratulations to the host. World point has reached 1 million. You can buy a low-level World Legacy card. Do you wish to purchase it? Of course. When Levi heard the system's voice, he immediately nodded. Unexpectedly. So fast. His world point had already reached 1 million points. That was to say, just this operation alone, he had obtained a total of 400,000 world point. But thinking about it carefully, it was also reasonable. One had to know. This world point was created because of the change in the world line. This Kingpin. No matter what, he could be considered Marvel Universe menace, a well-known little boss. If one were to say, Tony Stark was the village chief of the novice village, then this Kingpin was the little monster of the novice village. If it was a person, they had to solo it. Spider-Man, Daredevil, Iron Fist, Luke Cage. They were all his loyal nemesis. And now, after Levi killed him, all of this connection naturally ceased to exist. The world line had also changed greatly, which was why there were so many world point. However, this method of killing opponents, although it was useful, but it was too dry to fish. It was unsustainable development. He preferred to use a gentler method to obtain world point. Ding! Congratulations, you have triggered a critical hit effect. You have obtained a low-level World Legacy card *2. Oh! I didn't expect that there would be a pleasant surprise. The corners of Levi's mouth couldn't help but curl into a smile. In his Kamen Rider Universe's Legacy System, Kamen Rider Universe was also divided into high and low grades. For example, Zio and Decade, this kind of world that gave birth to Oma Zio and Grand Zio. Naturally, it was a high-level world. And like Genesis Rider, there were snakeskin monsters, President E and President K, such a world of extraordinary creatures. It was defined as an intermediate world. As for the rest, they were all low-level worlds. For example, Kamen Rider 01. Although in this world, there were powerful characters such as Ark and Eden. However, it was still divided into the lower realms. Moreover, the world point needed to unlock different levels of world's legacy was different. Alright. Now, let me take a look. This time, what kind of world can I draw out? This. Levi was looking forward to it. He raised his hand. He asked Azu to close the 4 virtual screens in front of him. Then, he opened the system. Chapter 64, Shocker of the Marvel Universe. He took out the 2 low-level World Exchange cards. These 2 low-level World Exchange cards floated in the air. Levi directly opened the first card. Congratulations to the host. It was emitting a lustrous glow. Acquired low-level world, Kamen Rider Legacy. Hearing this voice, Levi couldn't help but be stunned. Then, he couldn't help but narrow his eyes. Legacy of the 7 legendary Kamen Rider? Speaking of which, this world was really not simple. It could be said to be the source of all Kamen Rider. The first Kamen Rider in history also came from this world. It could be said to have extraordinary significance. But unfortunately, among them, the Kamen Rider's ability was not interesting. Just at this moment, the exchange card exploded. Then it turned into a ray of light. It poured into Levi's mind. In just an instant, all kinds of knowledge from Kamen Rider Ichigo had been integrated into his brain. Levi closed his eyes. He carefully sensed the legacy brought to him by this world. Speaking of which, before he transmigrated, although he had seen some of Kamen Rider, however, most of them were existences in the Heisei and Reiwa eras. He knew very little about Showa Rider. This 7 legendary Kamen Rider. Although he had long heard of it, but he had never dabbled in it. And now, with the fusion of legacy, he also had a specific understanding of the story of Kamen Rider Ichigo. The story of Kamen Rider Ichigo was straightforward. The students of North City University were from their hometown. On the way home, they were kidnapped by the evil organization, Shocker. Then, they were brought to the Shocker base. A crazy scientist transformed him into existence with the ability of insects. But fortunately, with the help of his teacher, he successfully escaped from the organization. Then, he transformed into Kamen Rider. We fought to the death against the monsters of Shocker. He saved the world by fighting life and death. It sounded. This seemed to be a very cliché story. However, he had a far-reaching influence on Kamen Rider universe, who was behind him. Many of the settings Kamen Rider made after that came from this. For example, Rider Kick, friend and foe sharing the same source of power, motorcycle, etc. After understanding the general situation, Levi began to learn other things. After a long time, only then did he open his eyes again. Is this legacy from world of Kamen Rider Ichigo? His eyes were shining brightly. It was so terrifying that no one dared to look straight at him. What he had obtained. The Shocker organization's secret, which is about the technology of transforming people. Speaking of the Shocker organization, it was the first villain organization among Kamen Rider. It was active in various historical times. Be it Heisei or Reiwa. They could always be seen. They were defeated again and again. However, not long after. It would be like an insect that would revive from the ashes. Continue to offer your experience to future generations of riders. The degree of its brutality. It couldn't help but cause people to be moved. But, speaking of which, Shocker is very similar to Hydra. Levi sat on the sofa, his finger pressed against his face. He said thoughtfully. Yes. This Hydra. He was simply an imitation of the Shocker organization. Both of them were the remnants of Nazi. The goal was to conquer the world. Hydra was hiding in the dark and constantly developing his power, waiting for an opportunity to move. And Shocker was not to be outdone. He shuttled through different Kamen Rider universe. Every once in a while, he would jump out and accept Kamen Rider's beating. Thinking of this, a smile appeared on Levi's face. In his mind, an even more brilliant idea suddenly appeared. That was to transform Hydra and turn it into Shocker organization. That's right. Although the current him had obtained the technology of Shocker. But he did not want to operate it personally. Compared to biological technology, he was more interested in machine technology. These few years, he had always been studying Humajir's technology. There was still a massive flaw in the modification of living things. So, rather than letting himself study it, it was better to throw this technology out. Let Hydra do the dirty work and carry out modifications and manufacturing. This way, not only could he obtain world point, he could also have a powerful villain force. Of course, to complete this operation, he needed a medium. Azu. Levi suddenly stood up. He shouted at Azu, who was behind him. President, is there anything that I can do for you? Azu held his red hair and immediately asked. Help me take a look. Where is this Winter Soldier now? Send someone to bring him to the laboratory on the 3rd floor. Levi stood up and walked to the front, his hands behind his back. Yes, Sir President. Let me check it out. Azu touched her headphones. The headphones immediately turned red. Chapter 65, Everything follows the will of the President. Let's begin. Outside the laboratory, Levi crossed his arms in front of him. Without any hesitation, he immediately gave the order. Meanwhile, Humajir in the laboratory immediately pressed the activation button of the AI chip. Blue lightning appeared in the center of the AI chip. Then, it spread out in all directions. Bzzttt. In an instant, Winter Soldier's entire body twitched. His face also became ferocious. Obviously, the current just now had stimulated his pain nerves. Erg! A shout came from his mouth. His arms were also stretched taut. His eyeballs were rolling under his eyelids. It seemed like he was going to wake up at any moment. But at this moment, the Dr. Humajir next to him timely injected a tube of anesthetic into his body. Of course. For a biological weapon like Winter Soldier, the anesthetic injected into it was also specially made. The dosage was enough to paralyze an elephant. And with the injection of the anesthetic, this Winter Soldier also calmed down. The artificial intelligence chip was also reactivated. It was one with Winter Soldier's body. It looked like only Winter Soldier had the physical qualities required for the implant. Only then would he be able to resist the backdraw of the AI chip. Next, the doctor's type Humajir had finished sewing up the wound. Only then did he complete the operation of this operation. Very good. When Levi saw all of this, the corners of his mouth curled into a smile. Now, let me take a look. Let me see the connection of this AI chip. He raised his hand and lightly tapped the communicator beside his ear as he spoke. Speaking of which, Levi's communicator. Its prototype was ZAIA's company communicator. Once it was activated, it could allow the human brain to operate for 1000%. Any information received, it would be processed through ZAIA's connector. They would be able to quickly find a solution for anything. In fact, when he was experimenting, this ZAIA communicator was developed earlier than Humajir. After all, this ZAIA communicator only needs chips and headphones. And Humajir required more things. However, after researching ZAIA's connector, he did not push it directly into the market. Such high-performance tools, once it was launched, it was bound to compete for the later market of Humajir. This was not what Levi hoped to see. So, he took apart most of the functions of ZAIA's communicator. He only made a low-end version of smart glasses and pushed it to the market. This smart glasses was still greatly praised. Even back then, at the banquet, the glasses that Tony Stark wore. In fact, they were modified based on the smart glasses released by Hiden Technology. The core processing chip was purchased from Hiden. This was also the reason why Izu could detect Tony's movements so fast. Ding! ZAIA communicator, fully activated. AI chip, connected. Connection successful. Levi raised his hand and swept it lightly. A blue screen appeared in front of his eyes. On it, all information about Winter Soldier appeared at this moment. His heartbeat, pulse, breathing. Even his brain wave. It was clearly visible. Not bad. As expected of a biological weapon created by Hydra. The physical performance is so superior. Levi looked at the data in front of him and could not help but nod in praise. This Winter Soldier's physical fitness, crushing normal people. Even compared to Metsubujinrai.net, who Arc created, he was not inferior. Of course, they were referring to the time before they were without transformation gear. The moment they transformed to become Kamen Rider, they would be incomparable to Winter Soldier. In that case, they would naturally not be able to be mentioned in the same breath. Then, next, let's test it again. This AI chip, can it take over Winter Soldier's body? As he spoke, Levi raised his hand. He gently pressed a button on ZAIA's connector. A burst of red light burst out from the connector. Thinking program transfer. At this moment, Winter Soldier, who was on the operating table, suddenly opened his eyes. He stood up straight and walked in front of Levi. Everything follows the will of the president. After he finished speaking, he even bowed respectfully. Very good. When Levi saw this scene, he nodded once more. This way, he had already taken control of Winter Soldier from the dark. As long as he activated that person's artificial intelligence chip, he would be able to control Winter Soldier's body completely. Of course. Now, he would replace Winter Soldier's personality. It wouldn't be of much use. After all, he had a lot of people under him, Humajir. He didn't need Winter Soldier as a puppet. What he wanted was for Winter Soldier to return to Hydra's base. Then, he would be able to secure a high position. He would gradually take control of Hydra and become the new leader. When that time came, he would activate it later. The benefits he would gain would be the greatest. And now, for the next plan on what Levi want to do. Chapter 66, Implanting the Winter Soldier. Her eyes also turned red. A moment later, Azu turned around. President. Everything has been handled. Winter Soldier has been sent to the third underground floor. Azu said respectfully. Very good. Come with me. Levi turned around and said indifferently. The key to his plan. It was Winter Soldier, who came from the Hydra facility. The two of them took the elevator. Not long after, they arrived at the space on the third underground floor. This was the research base of ZAIA's technology. This place was much better than Hiden's research and development department. The research here was undoubtedly much darker. And among this, the technology that satisfied Levi the most. It was the artificial brain insertion technology. The so-called brain implant technology. It was to install Humajir's AI chip into the human brain. Usually, this AI chip was hidden in the target's brain. It would not do anything to them. But at a critical moment, this AI chip would activate. That guy's personality will be replaced. His entire body will become the puppet of the AI chip. In the original work, people in 01 world had conducted this type of experiment before. For example, he implanted Naki's AI chip into Isamu's body. This allowed Isamu to use the Zetsumarisur that only Metsubujinrai.net could use. However, this technology involves the human brain. It was extremely dangerous. Since Levi finished researching this technology, he has done his trial and error. He had also tried more than a dozen times. Of course, they were all prisoners on death row. But all these experiments, without exception, all of them ended in failure. For example, in the process of implanting, the electricity generated by the chip directly killed the brain cells. The wound had not been stitched cleanly up yet. People could not do it. Or perhaps, the chip was successfully implanted. However, when used, there was no change in personality. In short, this technique, it had yet to achieve the same effect as he had hoped. Therefore, Levi left it behind. However, today, this technology was going to return to the world. Not long after, Levi brought Azu along. They arrived at the door of the third level of the AI chip laboratory. This laboratory of the human artificial intelligence chip. Azu was very curious about this. That's right. This is the place that gave birth to the core parts of the Humajir. Levi said proudly. The same year, after obtaining Humajir's technique, he was highly excited. He had used it for a long time. Only then was he able to create this AI chip. Its difficulty was beyond imagination. And now, this place had been modified to create an existence similar to an actual operation. Winter Soldier was tied to the operating bed. He was still in a coma. Obviously, that attack just now had dealt a great deal of damage to him. However, there was no need to worry. This fellow was a biological weapon. His recovery ability far exceeded that of ordinary people. Then now, let the transformation begin. Levi snapped his fingers. 4 doctor-type Humajirs walked out from behind the laboratory. Because this was a secret experiment. Therefore, these 4 doctors-type Humajir were specially made for this experiment by ARC. Their technology had long been perfected. The operation light on the top of the laboratory was turned on. The sterile environment was also automatically activated. Levi and Izu, they could only observe the situation through the glass window. Bzzzztttt. The sound of electric drill continued to ring out. As a biological weapon, this Winter Soldier's muscles and skull far surpassed ordinary people. Therefore, this also took them a lot of time. Only after a maximum effort did a gap appear. Next, the most important thing was the process of implanting the AI chip. If there was a slight error, the experiment would be declared a failure. But fortunately, everyone present was Humajir. If it is about precision and preparation, none of them were comparable to humans. The AI chip was perfectly intact and implanted into Winter Soldier's brain. However, this was not the most crucial part. The most crucial part. It was the time for the AI chip to activate. Because at that time of activation, the AI chip would release electricity. This was nothing to Humajir. After all, they were born to be driven by electricity. But for the human body, it wasn't easy. Many experiments before had failed at this step. Then, let's see what this guy made of. Chapter 67, Experimental Subject Escaped. He wanted Winter Soldier to return to Hydra's base safely. Moreover, he also wants to bring along the modified technology of Shocker. If he overdoes himself, it would arouse suspicion. Everything had to be done slowly. In this way, this matter would only succeed in the end. Then next, let us do it. Cooperate with him and put on a big show. Levi looked at Winter Soldier, who had been taken over by the artificial intelligence, and a sneer appeared on his face. Of course, Levi definitely wouldn't choose to use Hiden's underground as his stage. After all, this was his lair. In fact, he also had some secret bases in other places in New York. It was used to study other things. It was just that it was not commonly used. And now, let's borrow one of them. Let's complete our plan. President, you are really evil. Azu, who was at the side, could not help but clap his hands in praise. Very quickly, this winter soldier had been transferred to another location. He quietly waited for the play to start. Who? Bucky only felt that his consciousness was chaotic. It was as if he was wrapped in a sea of water. There were fragments constantly flashing back and forth. A flying plane, a man wearing a star-lined outfit. A cold battlefield, a cold-blooded killer with a mechanical arm. And finally, that transforming man became the Kamen Rider who attacked him. It dealt a fatal blow to himself. The violent wolf had charged at him. At this moment of extreme danger. Boom! Winter Soldier suddenly opened his eyes. So it was. Was he dreaming just now? And just after, he relaxed a little. He felt that something was wrong. He hurriedly looked down. He saw that he was completely naked. He was soaked in an unknown green liquid. There were all kinds of tubes sticking out of his body. What the hell is this place? Winter Soldier wanted to raise his hand. But he found out. His steel arms had long disappeared. Right. He suddenly remembered. His previous mission was cooperating with the other Winter Soldier program to bring Hiden Intelligence's president back to Hydra's base. But it was very obvious. The mission has failed. The other 4 Winter Soldier program died in battle. He himself was also beaten unconscious. In that case, he should be in the enemy's internal base now. Thinking of this, Winter Soldier's eyes instantly became sharp. There was no one around for the time being. He suddenly raised his other arm and smashed it towards the glass wall in front of him. Boom! The glass shield shook a bit. A small crack appeared on it. Winter Soldier aimed at the crack and slammed it a few times. Crack! The crack spread. Finally, it completely broke apart. Crash! The cultivation fluid flowed all over the ground. And Winter Soldier. He also pulled out the tubes on his body and jumped out. He squatted on the ground and carefully examined his surroundings. He saw that his surroundings were extremely dark. Dozens of glass cabins stand in the middle. They emitted a faint green light. Damn it! What the hell is this place? Winter Soldier's face was full of doubts. An underground research base of this scale. It was definitely not simple. Just as he was about to go forward and take a further examination, footsteps sounded from the side. Experimental subject tried to escape. Experimental subject tried to escape. At this moment, a few Humajir holding submachine guns rushed in. They raised their hand. He fired at Winter Soldier. Da 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 da. Winter Soldier's body flipped. He dodged the attack. The bullet shattered the glass cover beside it. The cultivating fluid flowed all over the ground. The entire ground seemed extremely slippery. When Winter Soldier saw this, he slid below. He immediately came under a Humajir. That guard Humajir immediately raised the gun in his hand. He wanted to shoot at him. Unexpectedly, this Winter Soldier punched him. Then, he snatched the gun from Humajir's hand. Then, he instantly retaliated. Da 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 da. In less than a moment, the few Humajir lay on the ground. Their body was constantly emitting sparks. Winter Soldier pulled out a guy's clothes. After putting it on himself, he crept out of the laboratory. And at this time, in the corridor, dense footsteps sounded again. Experimental subject tried to escape. Capture him as soon as possible. Humajir's voice rang out once more. Winter Soldier supported himself against the wall. He continued to retreat. When he was about to descend, he saw the large number of Humajir coming at him. Chapter 68, Scripted Escape. He flees to the other side but accidentally touches a switch. The other laboratory behind him. It suddenly opened. Winter Soldier could only enter it, wanting to avoid the chase for the time being. The moment he enters, the door closed instantly. Winter Soldier quickly raised the gun in his hand and looked around. What he found was, it was the information room of the entire base. On the main control screen, a X symbol appeared. With his keen sense of smell, Winter Soldier immediately sensed that it was not a simple X. He immediately tried to check it. As Hydra's ultimate biological weapon, this Winter Soldier was also proficient in various other skills other than assassination. In less than a moment, the password to the database was cracked. All sorts of confidential information were revealed. Winter Soldier immediately checked it. He wanted to see if there was any helpful information. The organization here is called Faust. It is an organization that specializes in human body modification and strengthening. A force affiliated with Consortium X. Hiden Intelligence. It is also a subordinate force of the Consortium X. President Levi is an elected agent selected by the organization. Winter Soldier quickly browsed the information in front of him. He recorded it in his mind. Apart from this information, in the library, there were all kinds of modified materials. It was very comprehensive. It seemed this organization had existed for a long time. He should bring it back to Hydra. Thinking of this, Winter Soldier no longer hesitated and immediately stood to the side. He found the USB and copied all the information. Then he put it into his mouth. Then he passed through the information room again. He found the entire base's defense map. Then, through the defense map, he found the weakest spot. He directly charged out. Winter Soldier did not know everything he had done. At this moment, it was completely planned by Levi. Looking at the figure of Winter Soldier fighting hard on the screen, Levi couldn't help but pick up a glass of red wine from the table and slowly savor it. This Winter Soldier. He was following the script that he had planned. He walked towards the target he had set. Thinking of this, the corners of his mouth couldn't help but reveal a smile. They followed Winter Soldier out of the base. Some of the scenes in the base also buzzed. They disappeared. Only some necessary props were left. It was still standing there. That's right. That so-called Faust base. It was just a shadow shed that Levi had carefully built for Winter Soldier. There were many things inside. They were all displayed through virtual projections. As for the information in the information room, it was also what he had Azu compile. This Faust organization was created by Kamen Rider. It was founded by the Gento Kohimuro. As for the Consortium X, it was the villain organization of Kamen Rider W. In the following few groups of Kamen Rider, they also appeared. Now, let me take a look. How do I go back to this tool to realize my purpose? Report it to his upper echelons, Hydra. Levi folded his fingers together. A smile appeared on his face. The lens of his eyes shone brightly in the darkness. He looked like a schemer. As for ZAIA's communicator, it also glowed with a red light. And at the same time, Winter Soldier also suddenly felt his mind. He felt a burst of pain. He fell to the ground. However, he immediately got up. He didn't care too much about it. Perhaps it was the aftermath of his injuries. Damn it! Winter Soldier shook his head. He tried his best to keep himself awake. This place was still near the enemy base. He must not faint. He should leave this place as soon as possible. Thinking of this, Winter Soldier stumbled towards the main road. And at this time, a silver supercar was coming from the front. The driver was holding his girlfriend, and the ear-piercing sound of rolling echoed out. He was having a good time. He saw a person suddenly jump out from the front. Frightened, he quickly stepped on the brake. TSSSSSTTT. The tires bite the ground in a death grip. It left a black mark. It stopped about 10 centimeters away from Winter Soldier. Ah! His girlfriend raised her head in pain. The driver first let out a long sigh of relief. Then, he pointed at Winter Soldier in front of him and started cursing. Who knew that Winter Soldier was stopping his sports car? He suddenly raised his head menacingly. Chapter 69, The Aftermath of the Three Assassination. The fierce look in his eyes instantly frightened the driver. Get off! Winter Soldier did not waste any second. He raised the gun in his hand. He pointed at the guy. The driver didn't even have time to put on his pants. He rolled down from the car and didn't even dare to fart. Winter Soldier jumped into the sports car and stepped on the gas. He then drove towards Hydra's base. Only the driver and his girlfriend were left shivering in the cold wind. Hey, I want to call the police. Someone just robbed our car. That guy quickly called the police. I'm sorry, sir. Right now, the manpower in our police station is limited. For the time being, I can't help you deal with this problem. There was a click. The call was hung up. Only the driver was left. His face was full of confusion. Yes. At this time, the entire New York police station was in an extremely busy state. The operator received all sorts of complaints and calls. The entire police detectives in the police station were all mobilized. If it was a small matter like robbery, they had no time to deal with it. The reason why they were so busy was yesterday's event. It was about the assassination of two rich people from the Marvel Universe. One must know. This Kingpin and the Blackwater Mercenary Group's president. They were both wealthy existences. First, let's talk about the Blackwater Mercenary Company's president. He ran the world's largest mercenary company. In terms of strength, he could easily overthrow a small African country. The number of mercenaries under him was even greater. As for Kingpin, there was no need to talk long about him. Although on the surface, he was just an ordinary rich man. But everyone knew that he had the power of the underworld. The death of two big shots. The shaking that was caused was unimaginable. The entire New York was shaken. News reports. Even more so, it involved the work of the table. People began to guess who had assassinated these two fellows. But because the two of them were not doing proper business, the number of their enemies was unimaginable. When the police investigated, they had no clue at all. However, even if they had no clue, they had to bite the bullet and investigate. Otherwise, they would be sprayed into sieves by the public. Of course, the police had already learned about Levi's assassination. After all, the commotion they caused was not small. The sound was deafening. They even sent a plane. However, because of this, Levi sent people to clean up the scene. Moreover, he asked Izu to monitor the internet. Delete everything related to the video. Moreover, he was a partner of the police. Therefore, the police did not investigate too much. They only asked for a routine inquiry. They no longer came to disturb him. Moreover, they did not associate the other two assassination cases with Levi. They simply believed it. These three assassinations were all done by a terrorist organization. As for Levi, he was not like the previous two wealthy people. He nearly died at the hands of a terrorist organization. It was all because of good luck. It was the protection of Humajir, a good friend of his. This was the only way to avoid this disaster. Of course, this was only an internal guess of the police. They did not reveal this news. However, it spread privately. For a time, the sales of the security-type Humajir increased significantly. And those who came to order them were all top rich people. They did not lack money. However, they placed great importance on their own safety. Especially after hearing this rumor. They didn't care whether it was useful or not. They would order dozens of Humajir first. The outstanding one was a rich and overbearing person. For this kind of order, Levi naturally raised his hands to welcome them. After all, these top rich people possessed resources that ordinary people could not hope to obtain. He arranged for Humajir to be by their side. Firstly, he could obtain all sorts of information. Secondly, he could also build his own network of connections. He would build a foundation for his future development. Why not? Even Chief George openly expressed his opinion in the face of the reporters' questions. Also promised. If the first batch of police-type Humajir were to be put into practical use, it would be the same quality as the rest. It would be of help to New York's security. Then, the police would soon purchase the second batch. This would relieve the pressure on New York's police force. And just as Hiden Intelligence was making a huge profit. Empire building. In Hydra's secret base, there was another scene. The pressure in the base was lower than before. A group of scientists. When doing things, all of them were trembling in fear, as if they were walking on thin ice. They were careful. They didn't even dare to breathe too frequently. They were afraid of angering the leader of this base, Dr. Zola. Because it was just yesterday. They had already received the news that their operation had failed. Not only had Hiden Intelligence's president not been brought back, but he had also been completely wiped out. The Winter Soldier program that had been sent out had also been wiped out. It could be said that he had lost both his wife and kids. Dr. Zola immediately shouted in anger when he heard this news. And after that, Shields Pierce suddenly called. Chapter 70, Consortium X. He say that Hydra and the other branches should not make any more inquiries about Hiden Intelligence. All the previous plans. All of them were invalidated. This action made Dr. Zola burn with rage. One must know. He was still very concerned about Humajir's technology. First, it could help Hydra revival. Secondly, it could help him build a brand new body. It would allow him to move more freely. So at the meeting at that time, that was why he was so keen on Humajir's technique. But now, not only did the operation fail, Pierce also prohibited him from continuing to act against Hiden Intelligence. Wasn't this completely breaking his wishful thinking? Thinking of this, Dr. Zola couldn't help but feel a wave of resentment in his heart. Speaking of which, he was also one of the most experienced people in Hydra. But in terms of power, it was far inferior to others. Not to mention Baron Strucker and Baron Zima. Even someone like Pierce. Now, they could even shit on top of his head. How could the arrogant Dr. Zola endure this? So, at this moment, he was filled with anger. Today, during the experiment, a researcher next to him had made a small error in his experiments. He was directly blasted into smithereens by Dr. Zola's laser gun. Not even bones remained. It could be said that his fate was extremely miserable. Therefore, everyone was being really very careful. They did not dare to touch his eyebrows. As for Dr. Zola, he was buried in his laboratory. Think about how to turn the tables. Only then would he be able to regain control over Hydra. However, at this moment, the door suddenly opened, and a subordinate rushed in. Dr. Zola. What is it? Why are you in such a panic? Dr. Zola turned around. He pointed his own screen at the guy and said in an extremely gloomy voice. This guy. If he could not explain the reason, then, he was afraid that he would not be able to see the sun tomorrow. He saw the cold eyes of Dr. Zola. The subordinate couldn't help but shiver. However, he still reported the information truthfully. Doctor, Winter Soldier is back. What? Dr. Zola was a little surprised when he heard this news. Weren't those Winter Soldier program completely wiped out? How could there still be a fish that escaped the net? Let him see me. After thinking for a while, Dr. Zola spoke directly. Yes. Not long after, the injured Winter Soldier covered his broken hand. It's been a long time. Winter Soldier. When Dr. Zola saw Bucky, he could not help but sigh. Walking in. Come to think of it, they were also old acquaintances. Back then, when Nazi was still in Germany, Bucky had once pursued him together with Captain America. Later on, he also participated in Winter Soldier program's plan. The two of them could be said to be old acquaintances. It was just one-sided. Alright, let's begin the mission report. This was a tradition of Hydra. After each mission, he had to report the specific process of the mission to the senior officer. Winter Soldier did not waste words. He began to narrate directly. When Isamu transformed into a salt wolf, he began to talk about the matter. I knew it. This Hiden Intelligence also has a higher level of technology. If we can get it, we, Hydra, will walk towards revival. He said fanatically. No. He had to tell Pierce, Strucker, and the others the news immediately. This way, this operation against Hiden Intelligence might be restarted. Right. How did you escape afterward? Dr. Zola asked subconsciously. After I woke up, I found myself in an experimental base. Winter Soldier did not hide anything. He told them how he had escaped from the base. He told them all about the secrets he had discovered. And the main point was Consortium X. According to Winter Soldier's narration, it should be a huge organization. Its scale was beyond imagination. And technology was developed. That Hiden Intelligence was the representative on the surface. Consortium X. Hearing this name, Dr. Zola couldn't help but be slightly stunned. Because he had no idea of this organization. One had to know. Their Hydra's intelligence gathering work was very powerful. Except for the distant ancient country of the East. There were large numbers of Hydra's forces lurking all over the world. Their tentacles extended to various fields, such as the economy, politics, the military, etc. They had borrowed even Hydra to plant or search for information. However, for the organization that Winter Soldier had mentioned, Consortium X. However, they did not have any information or records of it. There were two possibilities. This was a fake organization. It was made up by the Winter Soldier to deceive him. Or there was this organization, and it was more powerful than anything Hydra has encountered thus far. Moreover, it was hidden even deeper than Hydra. It was hidden better than them. That was why such a situation had occurred. If that were the case, then it would be too terrifying. Do you have any evidence of their existence? Dr. Zola could not help but ask. Chapter 71, Darkness Within Azu. He didn't quite believe it. In this world, there were even more secretive organizations than Hydra. Winter Soldier took out the information he had copied. Dr. Zola controlled the mechanical arm. He picked up the USB and inserted it into the computer in the laboratory. A projection of information immediately appeared on the big screen of the entire laboratory. Dr. Zola began to read it. At the beginning, he was still a little careless, because he was skimming over the text. But the more he saw, the more excited he became. He became even more excited. He seemed to have fallen into a state of madness. I can't believe it. There's such a technique. His voice was trembling. It was as if Dr. Zola had seen a whole new world unfolding before him. Although much information is contained within it, there were some flaws. But if it is really according to the data, then they would be able to create a batch of substantial biochemical modifications. At that time, Hail Hydra! It would rise again. This is a technique comparable to that of Humajir. Dr. Zola was already a little eager to try. However, this information, he did not want to inform Pierce and Strucker for the time being. Let him conduct some experiments first. If the experiment succeeded, in that case, his power would be able to expand. At that time, these fellows would have to bow down to him. He would also climb to the peak of power once more. Ha ha ha. A wanton laughter came from the mechanical body. Dr. Zola's face was sinister. Sent down the order. Seal off all this information, only me. There was a saying that Hydra was similar to Shocker, except that they did not have a leader. Shocker's 3 leaders, Jigoko Taishi, Dr. Shinigami, and Colonel Zal. It can even correspond with the cadres in Hydra, one by one. Immediately, I am going to start this unparalleled research. Dr. Zola looked at the information. He laughed wildly as he spoke. As for Winter Soldier, he looked at the fanatical Dr. Zola and couldn't help but frown. He felt that something was wrong. However, he couldn't tell. What was the problem? He could only stand there silently. Through his eye, Levi took in all the pictures in Hydra's base. Very good. Everything is running according to my expectations. This Dr. Zola was indeed attracted by the technology he provided. And from the looks of it, this guy's ambition was not small. It seemed that he wanted to monopolize this technology and develop his own power. But that's good too. A new Shocker organization was born from Hydra's corpse. This scene was exciting just thinking about it. A mocking smile appeared on the corner of Levi's mouth. Come on. Follow this script. Walk on step by step. He raised his hand and fiercely looked at the book. And at this moment, the communicator suddenly rang. A screen in front of him immediately popped up. It was a call from Azu. When Azu saw this, he immediately turned her head. Her face was full of jealousy. Levi chuckled. Then he picked up the call. What's wrong, Azu? On the screen, Azu bowed slightly. Then he said, President. Just now, General Ross from the military sent you an email. He invites you to the military camp of Caesars in Florida. It will be a discussion about Humajir's purchase. After hearing this, Levi nodded slightly. All right, I got it. Azu, help me prepare. We will set off in a bit. This military purchase. It was a big deal. And it was related to his future plans. Naturally, he had to go personally. Yes, Sir President. Azu nodded obediently, and then the screen closed. And Levi also stood up. President. Are you going to abandon Azu again? At this time, Azu, on the side, put on a crying face. All right. Relax and stay here. Help me look after Ark's operation. When there's a chance, I will take you out. Levi gently stroked her head and comforted her. Really? President. Then it's a deal. Azu looks like a happy child. Her face was full of joy. It was hard to believe that she was just an ice-cold mechanical creation. On the contrary, she was more like an ordinary teenage girl. Of course. It's just that they are black-bellied, poisonous snakes and occasionally burst out with robust malice. This was not what Levi wanted in public. The reason why he did not dare to bring her out. Soon. Levi took the elevator and went straight up. Soon, they arrived at the top floor of the Hiden Intelligence headquarters. At this time, a tall, silvery white fighter jet had already stopped there. It was the same as Levi's supercar. They were all developed by Hiden internally. Its appearance was similar to the Victory Swallow in Tiga. However, it appeared to be a bit more technologically advanced. It was completely controlled by AI. Chapter 72, Secret Base of the U.S. Military. This airship has various functions, such as automatic stealth, emergency shelter, etc. Even the most advanced radar of the American Army could not detect it. President. It's ready. We can set off at any time. Izu said softly as he waited at the entrance of the plane. 2 rows of police Humajir stood on both sides of the red carpet. Okay. Let's go. Levi nodded and passed through Humajir's welcoming formation. Then, he stepped into the fighter jet. Izu and Humajir, who were in charge of guarding, followed closely behind and entered the fighter jet. Among them, there was also the figure of Isamu. That's right. This time, other than Izu, Fuwa Isamu would also go with him. This Isamu. He has temporarily been removed from his position as the captain of AIMSS Guard. He was responsible for the safety of Levi's trip. He was responsible for acting as his bodyguard. As for AIMSS matter, it was temporarily left to Uayaiba to handle. After everyone sat down, the hatch automatically closed. The tail of the fighter jet emitted blue exhaust flames. Hiden Intelligence, 001, codename Falcon, ready to take off. Please confirm. A blue light flashed in Izu's eyes, and his tacit approval was completed. Then, with a whoosh, the fighter jet soared into the sky and rapidly flew into the distance. The entire journey was not long. However, Levi still knew how to enjoy himself. The interior of the entire fighter jet was also decorated in an unusually luxurious manner. All sorts of fine wine could be found. He leaned against the leather sofa. While looking at the scenery outside the window, he enjoyed the wine and grapes. How carefree! Izu, on the other hand, was sitting beside him. She was constantly processing some of Hiden's documents. Only Isamu had a nervous expression. He seemed to be in so much trouble. He was terrified that an unknown force would attack this plane. In fact, he did not have to worry about this problem at all. After the fighter jet departed, it activated the stealth module. Not only was it invisible to the naked eye, and even radar was also unable to detect it. It was as if it had disappeared into the sky. No one had been able to detect them. Not long after, they were already above the military camp of Caesars on the continent. This military base was located in a desert. The surroundings looked desolate. Only the military base was bustling with noise and excitement. After applying for a landing permit, Hiden's fighter jet landed steadily. Its illusionary appearance attracted the attention of many people. At this time, the door behind it opened. Levi walked out with his subordinates. He just got off the fighter jet. He glanced at the entire military base. He found that the surface of the military base looked a little ordinary. However, there were many fighter jets parked above the ground. All sorts of weapons and personnel could be seen everywhere. Therefore, it would not be simpler on the inside. Thus, he clicked on the communicator. Izu, who was next to him, instantly understood. In less than a moment, the entire military base had already appeared before his eyes. It was just as he had guessed. The building on the ground was just a cover. The underground. It was like a beehive of biochemical research. It was incomparably huge. It seemed. There seemed to be some secret hidden within. Just as Levi was about to continue exploring, the person in charge of welcoming them had already walked over. Levi looked up. It was an old acquaintance. It was Tony's good friend, the future war machine. Colonel Rhodes. Mr. Levi, welcome. The two shook hands and walked inside together. Where is General Ross? Levi asked casually. We are currently conducting an experiment. Why don't I bring you along to take a look? Colonel Rhodes suggested. All right. Levi nodded. They rode the military jeep and arrived in front of a military building. Then, they entered the underground research base. At this time, he saw a row of generals in military uniforms standing in front of the glass fence. Inside, there was an equipment test. Oh! This guy is also here. Levi suddenly caught a glimpse of a figure and couldn't help but sneer. Norman Osborn. That's right. It was that guy. It seemed that the military was testing the products of Osborn's industry. In the environment simulation room, a soldier was wearing the green armor from Osborn's company. He stepped on the glider and rushed forward. The automatic machine gun below fired at him with all its might. All of them were avoided by him. Just as the people outside nodded and praised him. The soldier who was driving the glider was really careless. He crashed into one of the pillars. Boom! The person and the glider were directly blown into pieces. The surrounding people were speechless. When Norman Osborn saw this, he couldn't help but cover his face. However, he quickly explained. Generals! It was just an accident. I can guarantee that our glider is absolutely safe. However, at this time, a man in a military uniform with the rank of Lieutenant General interrupted his explanation. Chapter 73, Osborn's Anger. Mr. Osborn. Obviously, the performance of this glider cannot reach the standard of the Ministry of Defense. We will not purchase it. In addition, how is the progress of your physical enhancement plan? He frowned. He asked directly. We let the white mice absorb the physical strength enhancement drug. Their physical strength has increased by 8 times. Now, we're just short of human experiments. Norman Osborn hurriedly said. Is that so? I hope it really is as you say. The middle-aged general held his hat, looking a little impatient. Tell me the truth. I am not very interested in your human body enhancement plan. My higher UPS approved that. I am more interested in artificial intelligence. He continued. Yes. 5 years ago. It was also the military purchasing meeting. At that time, Osborn Industries proposed a plan for physical enhancement. It was said to be comparable to Captain America's serum from the past. The person in charge of the military saw this plan very well. Thus, he spent a large amount of US dollars to invest. As for Osborn's industry, it also relied on this east wind to continuously expand and strengthen. But now, the 5-year period was about to arrive. Osborn's body-strengthening drug still failed. If Osborn's company still couldn't produce any effective results in the experiment, then it would be impossible for them to do so. Then, the military would decisively withdraw their investment. Initially, this Norman Osborn wanted to rely on the green armor and glider to sell to the military. He also wanted to get some research funds. But it was obvious that the military did not buy it. So now, he could only complete the human body strengthening drug. 3 weeks. I'll give you 3 weeks. If your so-called physical strength enhancement drug is completed, the human experiment should have been conducted by then. If you fail to comply, I will revoke your research funding. Take care of yourself. After saying that, with his hat in hand, he walked out without looking back. The soldiers behind him also left in a flurry. Only Norman Osborn remained where he was. Needless to say, this Lieutenant General was General Ross. As the person in charge of the military this time, he was more interested in Humajir, who was under Levi. At this moment, he saw Levi at the side. He immediately changed his expression and smiled. Come with me to the office. As for Norman Osborn, who was far away, he looked at Levi. He clenched the report in his hand. A trace of resentment appeared in his eyes. However, none of the people present paid attention. Not long after, they passed through the guards of the soldiers. The two of them arrived at General Ross' office. Levi glanced at it casually. He found many pieces of news about Bruce Banner on the combat board. According to the plot analysis, this old fellow should have gone to Brazil to capture that green giant. It was just a pity that it was best to make a loss. In the end, he still escaped. Calculating the time, it should be during the last police station banquet. This was also the reason why he did not participate. I heard that someone attempted assassination on you recently. He wants me to contact the military forces. Can I help you investigate? General Ross picked up a cigar from his desk. After lighting it up, he took a puff and asked leisurely. No need. I will handle this matter myself. Levi sat on the sofa next to him. He said it calmly. Ross heard this and did not say anything else. The Ministry of Defense has already approved of Humajir's proposal. However, as for the number of purchases, it has not been confirmed yet. As he spoke, he took out a bottle of whiskey. He poured a glass for Levi and himself. When Levi heard this, he couldn't help but smile. This old fox wanted to add a temporary bargaining chip. Obviously, the Defense Department had already approved the advance plan. Now, it was just too much. How many Humajir wanted to purchase was not entirely up to him to decide. General Ross, if there is anything, just say it. Levi lifted the glass cup in front of him and shook it slightly. When General Ross heard this, he immediately laughed. It's convenient to talk to smart people. Since that's the case, I have something to say. I want you to help me arrest the Green Giant, Bruce Banner. General Ross went straight to the point. This is the information of the Green Giant. As he spoke, he casually opened the screen next to him. On it, there was detailed information about Bruce Banner. There were also some related videos. For example, there were a few days ago. He went to Brazil to capture the Green Giant's rampage situation. In the video, the Green Giant could be said to be very brave. Ordinary people would not be able to get close to him. Oh, General Ross is joking. If your military is unable to arrest it, how am I going to arrest him? Levi continued to shake his wine glass. Intuition. General Ross said confidently. Of course, although it was intuition, he had also analyzed it. Although it was intuition. But General Ross also had his speculations. For example, the assassination this time. One must know. The other two victims were not simple characters. One was the president of the Blackwater Company. Under his hands were thousands of well-trained elite mercenaries. Chapter 74, Tracking Bruce Banner. With a wave of his hand, he could overturn the regime of a small African country. As for Kingpin, there was no need to mention him. The underground emperor had great power. He had countless experts under him. It was an existence that could be said to be the emperor without a crown. However, it was precisely such an existence that had died under the assassination of the terrorist organization one after another. Not even bones remained. On the contrary, Levi seemed to be the weakest of the three. However, he escaped from this assassination. Furthermore, he had calmly cleaned up the scene. To say, his only loss is a dozen or so damaged Humajir. General Ross definitely wouldn't believe it. He had reason to believe it. This Levi still had some weapon hidden in his hands. Something far more powerful than Humajir. Only in this way would he be able to escape unscathed from that assassination. And the reason why he proposed to ask Levi to assist him. Capture the Green Giant together. There were many considerations. First of all, it was through this cooperation that the relationship between the two became closer. In the future, if he wanted to cooperate with Hiden, it would become even simpler. Secondly, he also wanted to use this cooperation to fight together. He wanted to test it out. Let's see if the Humajir was like what he had expected. He was extremely valiant. After all, he had only seen Humajir's action video before. He had yet to witness their activities with his own eyes. This joint operation. It could also be considered his personal opinion of Humajir, and it was also his last assessment. This would determine how much the military would purchase. This would determine how much they would buy. Let's see again. Would they be able to use them in this operation? They would force out the great killing weapon in Hiden Intelligence's hands. How smart was Levi? He understood General Ross's intentions in just a blink of an eye. He understood in his heart. No wonder this General Ross was able to achieve such a position. This move was like killing 3 birds with 1 stone. He had some skills. Thinking of this, Levi couldn't help but smile. He no longer refused. Since General Ross has said so, then we, Hiden Intelligence, will definitely support you with all our might. Good. When General Ross heard this, he could not help but laugh. Clang. The 2 cups clinked, announcing that the cooperation had been reached. Then, General Ross explained the reason for this operation in detail. It turned out, ever since the last time Brazil hunted him down, this Bruce Banner immediately became much more alert. He disappeared without a trace, making General Ross need to search for him for longer. However, just before this, an informant came to report. This Bruce Banner had appeared in the vicinity of the Mexico border. He initially thought, this guy would soon pass through the Mexico border and quietly return to the US. Unexpectedly. However, he had settled down in a city near the border. It seemed that he was preparing to settle down somewhere. This was a dilemma for General Ross. You must know that although Mexico is a weak country, but it was still a country, after all. If he led his men to break in and then used heavy weapons, it was easy to cause a diplomatic dispute. Although the US was a dominant country, it was still a country. However, there was still a need for face to be respected for everything. Last time, when he went to capture Banner in Brazil, General Ross tried to keep a low profile as much as possible. He didn't dare to expose his identity as a US soldier too much. So when he headed there, he only brought 100 Special Forces soldiers and some light weapons. Because of this, Bruce Banner was able to outmaneuver him calmly. However, he was so careful. However, his actions were still leaked out. In this regard, the government raised a strict protest. One had to know that even though the US was a dominant country, it still had a shady background. Thus, someone within the military raised the impeachment of General Ross. But fortunately, this General Ross had a great network. He quickly settled this impeachment. However, this impeachment also allowed him to act, not daring to be as arrogant as before. Therefore, when faced with Bruce Banner's situation, only then did he come up with the idea of having Hiden Intelligence take his place. He drove Bruce Banner from Mexico to the US border. By then, he could lead the US troops under his command to deal a terrifying blow to Bruce Banner. After the discussion, Levi flew back to the company first. He made some preparations. Then, he led hundreds of people to the border of Mexico. After getting off the plane, he found a luxurious hotel in a small town in Mexico. Speaking of this, Mexico, although it was poor, there were many high-end places. Levi found a high-end hotel and set it up as a temporary base. Izu, use satellite Zia to scan this place, he said. As the president, he would not be underprepared. Therefore, before taking action, he needed to confirm the map and make a plan. Yes, Sir President. A blue light flashed in Izu's eyes. Very quickly, they connected to the satellite, Zia. Soon, the map of the entire city appeared in front of Levi. In the map, an energy field was constantly spreading. One of the red dots. If nothing went wrong, this would be Bruce Banner. You should know. The reason why this Bruce Banner had mutated into a green giant was because of this. It was a large amount of gamma rays. So, there would always be radiation from the gamma rays on its body. And the satellite Zia was using this point. As long as there were energy fluctuations in that area, he would know that Bruce would be there. Chapter 75, Cornering Bruce Banner. Bruce Banner could be easily detected due to this gamma ray. Levi could easily lock into his position. He really appeared in the president's office. Levi said calmly as he adjusted his coffee. Clear the picture a little. Izu nodded and raised 2 fingers. As her fingers expanded, the pictures became bigger. The surveillance image was also enlarged. Very quickly, a clear image appeared on the virtual screen. He saw a man carrying a backpack. He was walking in an alley full of garbage. His expression was hurried. It was Bruce Banner. Very good. The corners of Levi's mouth curled up. It was obvious that Banner did not notice that he was being targeted. Soon, he arrived at the small house he rented. Very good. Contact General Ross. The two of them discussed it briefly. Finally, they confirmed the time for the operation. As for General Ross, after receiving the news, he led his American army to move out. On the road, hundreds of horses and dozens of tanks were seen. His voice rumbled and smoke billowed. The formation was extremely large. It also represented General Ross' determination this time. As for Levi, he also began to set up the formation. Hundreds of Humajir had already hidden in various areas. They were only waiting for Levi to give the order. At this time, the sun was setting. They headed towards the border. A helicopter slowly rose from the top of the luxury hotel and circled Mexico's small town. In the distance, the prosperity of the US city formed a sharp contrast with the darkness and silence of this small city. The propeller circled and made a loud sound. On the helicopter, Levi stood by the cabin door and observed the situation in the small city. The wind blew up his hair. Meanwhile, Izu was waiting at the side, waiting for his orders at any time. In his line of sight, a fully armed military Humajir was setting out from various small alleys to where Bruce Banner was. Very good. Levi glanced at him and said indifferently. The operation is about to begin. All troops, get ready. He gave the order. Below them, Humajir and the others were immediately on standby. The other 2 armed helicopters, prepare to take off. Pull them to a height and be the lookout post. When necessary, we can suppress Hulk with fire. Levi pressed down on ZAIA communicator, then ordered. Yes, this time. Besides sending out hundreds of military Humajir, he also sent out several hundred human soldiers. He also used 3 helicopters. Hiden also made this helicopter. Although it is not as good as the previous jet style, its performance is still outstanding. Got it. Got it. The 2 armed helicopters began to take off and pull up the altitude. Bang! The sound of the sniper rifle broke the silence of the night. It meant that the operation to capture Hulk had officially begun. Then, the dense sound of gunfire was like a storm. The metal storm instantly tore the place where Bruce Banner was hiding. The window shattered, and a figure jumped down from the 2nd floor, fleeing along the alley. President! Bruce Banner is moving towards the east. In the helicopter. Izu stared at the map and reported in real time. Put the lights on Bruce Banner and show them the way. Levi ordered. Buzz. One of the armed helicopters turned on the light directly. A colossal light descended from the sky and instantly shone on Bruce Banner. Damn it! Bruce Banner raised his hand and blocked his eyes. A hint of anger flashed in his eyes. But very quickly, he suppressed it. The Humajir troops quickly followed. The gunshots did not stop, and the bullets were showering like a storm. Bruce Banner frantically fled. He had lived here for a while. He still had a good understanding of the terrain. Thus, he turned to find a narrow path to drill through. Keep it up. However, he could not escape the pursuit of Humajir and the others. They seemed not to know exhaustion. They followed frantically. They followed closely behind. Humajir surrounded them from all directions. They were like zombies. All right. Now, use the cruise missiles to force Bruce Banner to the border. Levi looked at the live broadcast screen in front of him and the corners of his mouth rose. To-to-do. 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 The aircraft cannon hanging below the armed helicopter roared. 2 cruise cannons, a total of 18 cannon barrels, released blue flames. Boom. 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 The metal storm landed in front of Bruce. The house collapsed, and shattered rocks flew everywhere. It scared Banner so much that he ran away with his head held. How could flesh and blood fight against the cannons? Under the continuous driving of the 2 armed helicopters, he had no choice but to run south. President! Banner is about to enter the U.S. territory. After crossing that wide open area, Banner entered the U.S. territory. Their agreement with General Ross could be reached. On the other side, General Ross watched the broadcast on Levi's side and couldn't help but feel excited. What a good Humajir! Every one of them is no weaker than the SEAL assault team. He couldn't help but praise. However, it's my turn now. General Ross said confidently. He immediately led a large group of troops and prepared to intercept Bruce Banner. However, at this moment, a sudden change occurred. Roar! You forced me to do this. A terrifying roar spread out. It was even louder than the gunfire. Bruce Banner, who the bullet had hit, roared toward the sky. His bulging muscles crushed the clothes on his body. Then, a huge green monster appeared in front of everyone.